A billionaire woke up to a sound in his kitchen at midnight. When he turned on the light, he didn't find a thief. He found his black maid's little girl, crying on the floor, trying to eat leftovers from the trash. What he did next would shock everyone, and change 3 lives forever. The house of Harrison Blackwell slept under a veil of quiet that was almost holy. Outside, the city was a scatter of lights, but inside, time seemed to hold its breath. The marble floors glowed faintly under golden lamps. A grandfather clock marked the seconds with a hollow tick, each one echoing through the empty hallways like a reminder that nothing moved here anymore. Upstairs, in a study lined with dark oak and dust, the billionaire sat alone. A single photo rested on the desk, his wife Eleanor, frozen in a smile that belonged to another life. He poured a small glass of milk, the same ritual he had followed since she passed. "This house used to have laughter," he murmured, his voice rough with disuse. The sound disappeared into the silence like a pebble dropped in a well. He sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, where the chandelier shadows swayed gently, like ghosts that refused to leave. Somewhere beneath that silence, life was still stirring, fragile, frightened, and hungry. Downstairs, in the cavernous kitchen that gleamed like a museum, 10-year-old Lila Miller pressed herself flat against the cold metal of the pantry freezer. She could hear her own heartbeat, fast and uneven. Her small hands trembled against the tile. The smell of roasted chicken and butter hung in the air, thick and painful. She waited for the sound she feared most, the steady click of Mrs. Petrova's shoes on marble. The woman's steps faded into the distance. Lila counted slowly in her head. 1, 2, 60. Then she slipped out of the shadows. The kitchen was enormous, built for people who never cooked. Steel counters reflected her small figure as she crept across the room. The lights from the hallway traced her outline against the polished floor. She was barefoot, careful not to make a sound. On the far side of the kitchen sat a service cart. On it were the remains of someone's dinner, a bowl of macaroni and cheese, barely touched, and 2 bread rolls gone hard as stone. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "Please, just 1 bite," as if asking permission from the air itself. She lifted the foil, steam long gone, the smell still sweet. Her stomach twisted. She picked up the spoon, her fingers shaking so badly it clinked against the bowl. For a second, she froze, afraid even of her own noise. Then she took a bite. Cold. But to her, it was heaven. Each mouthful was a secret she had to swallow before it was taken away. Upstairs, Harrison stood by the window, looking down at the empty garden. His reflection stared back, silver hair, tired eyes, a man surrounded by everything except warmth. He sighed and turned off the light in his study. He would go to the kitchen, maybe heat the milk. Down below, Lila kept eating quickly, whispering to herself, "Mama won't be mad if she doesn't know." Her voice trembled. Her mother, Grace Miller, was somewhere upstairs polishing floors that already shone. She didn't know her daughter was awake, or that hunger had pushed her past fear. Lila finished half the bowl and glanced toward the door. For a moment, she imagined she heard footsteps. Her body went rigid. Silence. Only the hum of the refrigerator. She exhaled, a tiny sound in a house too big for sound. The clock upstairs ticked again. 1 life climbing down the stairs, another hiding under a table, both searching for something warm. Harrison Blackwell wanted sleep. Lila Miller wanted food. Neither knew they were about to collide in the quietest room in the world. The crash came like a gunshot through the sleeping house. Porcelain against marble. A sharp gasp. Then silence. Harrison Blackwell froze halfway down the staircase, the faint light from the hall washing over his robe. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined it, a noise from another memory, maybe his wife dropping a plate decades ago. But it came again, softer this time. A sound of someone breathing too fast. He pushed open the kitchen door. The lights flicked on. What he saw made no sense. A small girl, no taller than the counter, was on her knees among a scatter of yellow macaroni. Her fingers were red from the cold tile, clutching at the mess as if gathering treasure. Her face turned toward him, wet with tears and terror. The bowl lay broken beside her. For a second, neither of them moved. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Harrison took one step forward. The girl flinched back. He saw her lips move before any sound came. "Please," she whispered, "please don't fire my mama." Her voice cracked like something tiny and already broken. Harrison blinked. The words hit harder than he expected. Fire her mother? He looked at the spilled food again, the little hands shaking. "What are you doing?" His voice came out rough, unfamiliar to his own ears. I'll clean it, sir. I'll clean it, please." She spoke so fast the words tangled. She reached for the noodles again, scooping them into her palms, desperate to make them disappear. Harrison's shadow fell over her. "Stop," he said quietly. She froze. The word carried the weight of command, the kind that once moved boardrooms and markets. Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't look up. For a long moment, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the clock ticking somewhere upstairs. Harrison's gaze moved over the scene, the bowl, the food, the child. The housekeeper's rules flashed through his mind: no children in the main wing, no staff outside working hours, no noise after 10. He had signed off on those rules years ago without thinking. They had kept the house running like a machine. He had wanted order. Now order looked a lot like fear. He took another step, slow, careful, as if approaching a wild bird. The girl pressed herself against the cabinet, eyes wide, breath coming in short bursts. Her small frame trembled in the light. Harrison crouched slightly, studying her face. She was maybe 10, maybe younger. Brown skin. Hair tied back in a crooked braid. Her clothes were clean but faded, her shoes too thin for the cold tile. "What's your name?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "Lila." Her voice was barely a breath. "Lila what?" "Miller." The name stirred something faint in his memory. Miller, the maid. The quiet one who polished silver in the library. He had nodded to her once or twice, never spoken more than a word. So this was her daughter. He exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his tone had lost its sharpness. The girl's eyes filled again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Mama told me to stay downstairs. She looked at the cold noodles still clinging to her fingers. "I was hungry." Harrison didn't move. The word settled between them, heavier than the silence. Hungry. The word sounded foreign in this kitchen, surrounded by stainless steel and abundance. He thought of the meals thrown away each night, the untouched plates cleared without question. He looked at her again. She was shaking, not from guilt but from something older, deeper. He felt something shift in his chest. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, softer this time, "but maybe I wasn't supposed to find you either." The girl didn't understand. She just kept her head down, shoulders trembling. Harrison stood there a moment longer, then did something that surprised even him. He went to the sink, grabbed a clean towel, and walked back to her. He knelt down, old knees creaking, beside the child. "Here," he said. "Let's clean it up." She blinked, confused. "Sir, no, I'll do it. Please." He shook his head. "We'll do it together." The fluorescent light buzzed above them as the billionaire and the maid's daughter knelt side by side on the kitchen floor, gathering the pieces of a broken bowl. Outside, the night held its breath again, as if the house itself couldn't believe what it was seeing. The kitchen had gone quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now, warmer, almost fragile. The broken bowl was gone, the floor clean, and yet something heavy lingered in the air between them. Harrison sat at the small staff table near the window, the same one where the cooks usually ate their lunch. Across from him, Lila perched on the edge of her seat, small hands folded in her lap, her eyes darting between him and the floor. She looked ready to run if he raised his voice. He didn't. He just studied her, the way one studies something they can't quite explain. Lila Miller, he repeated softly, testing the sound of it. Your mother is Grace Miller, isn't she? The girl nodded. Her braid slipped off her shoulder as she did. Mama works upstairs, she said quietly. She cleans the rooms that nobody uses. I know, Harrison murmured. He did know, vaguely. The quiet woman who polished his silver, who always said, "Good evening, sir," and never made eye contact. He had never thought about where she went when the work was done. She told me to stay in the lounge, Lila added, her voice trembling, but I was hungry. The last word cracked in the middle, small and raw. Harrison leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. From the garbage cart, he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. It's not stealing if it's going to be thrown away, she whispered. The simplicity of it hit him like a slap. He looked at her shoes, pink sneakers frayed at the toes, and the dirt on her hands where the cheese sauce had dried in thin yellow streaks. Her eyes were too big for her face. He turned his gaze away, pretending to straighten a napkin on the table. He wasn't sure why he felt ashamed. How old are you? He asked. 10, she said. Almost 11. She added the last part quickly, as if it might make her more acceptable somehow. Do you come here often at night? He said. No, sir. Just sometimes. When the smell comes upstairs. The smell? The food smell, she said, her voice so soft it was almost a breath. It's everywhere. It makes it hard to sleep. He looked toward the double ovens, still faintly warm from the dinner prepared hours ago. His chef had made veal that night. He hadn't eaten more than 3 bites. The rest had been scraped into the bin, as always. Waste had become part of the rhythm of his wealth. He looked back at her, a small girl trying to make herself invisible in a room that shone too brightly. Does your mother know you do this? He asked. No, she said quickly. She'd be mad. She'd say it's wrong. But you still came. I just wanted a little, she said. So she wouldn't have to cook when she gets home. She gets really tired. Her feet hurt. And sometimes she coughs a lot. Harrison's brow furrowed. She's sick. Lila's eyes flickered up, then back down. She doesn't say that word. She just says she's fine. But at night I can hear it. The coughing. It doesn't stop. She twisted her fingers together, nervous. She says it's from the fire. Fire? Before we came here, Lila said. The place we lived in burned. She ran back to help people. A lady's cat. She couldn't breathe for days. The doctor said her lungs got hurt. Harrison stared at her, the image forming slowly, this quiet maid running into smoke for someone else's pet. Does she have medicine? Yes. Pink pills and a blue thing she breathes in. But the doctor wants her to get something else. A treatment. Lila looked up at him now, her eyes shining. She said it costs more than a car. Harrison didn't answer. He was looking at her small hands again, the way she gripped the edge of the table as if the whole world might slip away if she let go. She says she eats at work, Lila went on softly, but I hear her stomach growl at night. She thinks I don't know. The words landed like stones. Harrison sat back, his chest tight. For years he had lived surrounded by excess, the kind where even silence felt expensive. He had thought poverty was something that existed somewhere else, in other neighborhoods, other lives. But it was here, sitting across from him with wide brown eyes and a voice that trembled every time it said, "Sir." He looked toward the hallway, where the light stretched into emptiness. Somewhere up there, Grace Miller was still working, probably polishing something that didn't need to shine. Lila rubbed at her arm, staring at the floor. "Are you mad?" she asked. "No," he said quietly. "Not at you." He reached across the table, placed the clean napkin near her hands. "Eat," he said. She blinked. "There's nothing left." "Then we'll fix that," he murmured. He stood, his movements slow, deliberate. He opened the refrigerator, the cold air spilling out in a white glow. Shelves full of untouched meals stared back at him. For the first time in a long time, Harrison Blackwell saw his house for what it was, not a home, but a monument to a man who had everything except warmth. Behind him, the girl sat very still, her hunger quiet but alive, shining through her eyes brighter than the light above them. The sound came before the woman did, a sharp rhythm of heels striking marble, steady, certain, like someone who believed the house belonged to her. Harrison lifted his head. Lila's back straightened, her small hands clutching the edge of the table. The light in the hallway grew brighter, spilling into the kitchen in a long, golden rectangle. Then she appeared. Mrs. Petrova. Tall, severe, her gray hair twisted tight, her face set into its usual look of disapproval. She carried a black trash bag in one hand and a clipboard in the other. When she saw them, she stopped dead in the doorway. For a moment, there was silence. Then her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, voice clipped, "what is the meaning of this?" Her gaze flicked from him to the child, to the crumbs of bread on the table. And then it landed on the small bowl beside Lila's chair, the one still holding a smear of cheese sauce. The color rose in her face. "You," she hissed, pointing a long, polished finger. "I knew it. Thief." Lila jumped to her feet, knocking her chair backward. "No, ma'am, please, I didn't." "Quiet." Petrova snapped. "You people have no respect. Stealing from the hand that feeds you." The words came sharp, heavy with something that wasn't just anger. Harrison felt them hit the air like ice. Lila's lip quivered. She pressed herself against the counter, trembling. He stood up slowly. "Mrs. Petrova," he said, his voice low, warning. "Sir," she said, breath coming fast, "I have been suspecting food was missing for weeks. I thought it was one of the night porters, but it's her." She jabbed her finger again toward the child. "This little rat sneaks into your kitchen and eats scraps like she owns the place. I will call security." "I will, that's enough," Harrison said. The tone stopped her mid-sentence. But only for a moment. "Sir, with all due respect, she is trespassing in the main kitchen. It's against every rule we have. If you let this go, the staff will think, she is a child," Harrison interrupted. The room froze. Lila's small chest rose and fell too fast. Petrova took a step forward, her heels clicking. "A child who steals," she said coldly. "You people always take what's not yours." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lila's eyes widened, confusion and shame mixing into tears. Harrison turned toward the housekeeper fully now. The exhaustion that usually softened his features was gone. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried through the room with the weight of command. "You will watch your tone," he said. Petrova blinked, startled. She opened her mouth, but he didn't let her speak. "She is not a thief," he said slowly. "She is hungry." The last word echoed. "And that's on us." Petrova stared at him as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Sir, the rules," he said, stepping closer, "were written to keep order. Not to shame a child who hasn't eaten dinner." His voice deepened, each word deliberate. "We throw away more food here in one night than her family sees in a week. And you're worried about rules?" For once, Petrova said nothing. The clipboard trembled slightly in her hand. Harrison looked down at Lila. She was staring at him, eyes glistening, one hand still clutching the hem of her worn shirt. "Go back upstairs, Mrs. Petrova," he said quietly. "Now." "Sir, that's an order." The housekeeper hesitated, lips pressed thin. Then she clutched the trash bag tighter and turned sharply on her heel. Her heels clicked twice more, then faded down the hall. The kitchen fell into silence again. Harrison exhaled. He hadn't realized how tense his shoulders were until the air left his lungs. Lila stood motionless, watching him as if afraid he might change his mind. He looked at her, and something inside him shifted, a memory of his granddaughter, maybe, or just the echo of a time when he still understood what it meant to care. "You're safe," he said. The word sounded strange in that room. He sat back down, his robe brushing the floor, and gestured to the chair she had knocked over. "Sit, Lila." She hesitated, then did. Her small fingers twisted together on the table. "She's going to tell my mama," she whispered. "She's going to get her fired." Harrison looked toward the doorway where Petrova had disappeared. "Not tonight," he said. His tone left no room for doubt. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Somewhere in that sound, the house shifted, if only a little, away from rules and order, toward something like decency. Harrison leaned back, studying the girl across from him. "You've had a long night," he said. "Finish what's left." Her eyes lifted, uncertain. "It's okay," he added, softer now. "Eat." She reached for the bowl with trembling hands, and for the first time in years, Harrison Blackwell sat in his own kitchen and watched another person eat, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as a human being who mattered. When the echo of Mrs. Petrova's heels finally faded, the kitchen felt still again, like the air had been holding its breath. Harrison stayed where he was for a long moment, staring at the doorway. Then he sighed and turned back to the mess on the floor. "We should finish cleaning," he said quietly. Lila nodded, her small voice barely reaching him. Together they moved slowly, gathering the last crumbs and shards of porcelain. Harrison picked up a dish towel and wiped the counter while she crouched to collect what little remained. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as though one wrong move might shatter everything again. When she stood, the sleeve of her shirt slipped down her arm, revealing something small and bronze cupped in her palm. Harrison noticed the glint immediately. "What's that?" he asked. Lila blinked, startled, and quickly hid her hand behind her back. "Nothing, sir," she said softly. "It's just my lucky charm." "May I see it?" His voice was gentle, not commanding. For a second she hesitated. Her mother's rule echoed in her mind: don't talk too much, don't show things, don't draw attention. But he was looking at her differently now, not as a servant's daughter, not as a problem, but as someone who deserved an answer. Slowly, she uncurled her fingers. Lying in her palm was a worn bronze pin, shaped like an eagle with its wings spread wide, talons gripping a tiny flag. Time had dulled the edges, but the detail was still sharp. Harrison leaned closer. The breath caught in his throat. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It was my great-uncle's," Lila said. "Mama says he was a soldier. A long time ago." Harrison reached out, but stopped before touching it. "That's a service pin," he said. "My father had one just like this. It was given to soldiers' families during the war." His voice had gone quiet, almost reverent. "World War II?" "Yes, sir. Mama said he jumped out of airplanes. Paratrooper, she called it." The pride in her voice shone through the exhaustion. She held the pin carefully, like it was alive. "He jumped into fire so others could live. Mama says that's what our family does." She smiled faintly, her eyes still on the pin. "We help." Harrison's throat tightened. For years he had believed the world was divided between those who succeeded and those who didn't, the strong and the weak. But now, in front of him, was the granddaughter of a man who had once run toward danger when everyone else ran away. He thought of his own father, a pilot who had come home broken, his medals locked in a drawer. They were from the same generation, maybe even the same sky. "Do you know his name?" he asked. "Uncle Mike," she said proudly. "Michael Cooper. Mama says he saved his whole team. He didn't come back, but they said he was brave." Harrison nodded slowly. "He was more than brave." He looked at her small hands again, the bronze catching the kitchen light. "He was the reason people like me get to live safe lives. The reason we have houses like this." Lila looked up, unsure how to respond. "Mama says we have to remember," she whispered. "Even if nobody else does." The words hit him harder than he expected. Remember. It was what Eleanor used to say before she died, when he still went to veterans' fundraisers and memorial events. He had stopped going. Too many speeches. Too many reminders of what he'd lost. But this girl, this child with a bronze pin, was what remembering looked like. "You keep it close," he said finally. "Don't ever lose it." "I never do," she said quickly. "When Mama gets scared, I hold it. It helps." Harrison looked away, blinking. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence again, steady and low. For the first time in years, he didn't hear it as noise, it sounded like breathing. "You know," he said after a moment, "my father used to tell me that courage isn't about medals or uniforms. It's about what you do when no one is watching." Lila tilted her head. "Like Mama?" "Yes," he said softly. "Exactly like your mama." She smiled, small and shy. Harrison stood, his knees stiff. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you something warm." "You're not mad anymore." "I don't think I was ever mad," he said. "Just, reminded." As she followed him to the refrigerator, the pin gleamed once under the kitchen light. He noticed how carefully she held it, how her thumb brushed the eagle's wings as if to promise she would keep its story alive. He poured her a glass of milk and watched her drink, her eyes bright despite the long night. For the first time in a decade, he felt something stir beneath the weight of his quiet life, something like pride, or maybe faith. He looked at her again, this tiny descendant of courage, and thought, there it is, the part of America we forgot. Two people sat in the kitchen of a mansion, one born into wealth, one into struggle, and somehow, in that shared silence, the distance between them began to close. The kitchen door burst open before dawn, the echo of hurried footsteps breaking the fragile calm. Grace Miller stood in the doorway, her breath coming fast, her uniform wrinkled, her face pale from exhaustion. She had run down 3 flights of stairs without stopping. Her chest heaved, and the cough she tried to stifle came out anyway, sharp and painful. "Mr. Blackwell," she gasped, one hand gripping the doorframe for balance. "Sir, I am so sorry. Please, please don't fire me." Her eyes found her daughter first. Lila stood by the table, her small hands clutching the bronze pin, eyes wide with guilt. "Mama," she whispered, "I didn't mean." Grace shook her head, her voice trembling. "It's all right, baby." Then she turned to Harrison, her fear spilling into the room. "Sir, I'll pay for whatever she ate. I swear it. It was my fault. I should have watched her. Please, she's just a child. Don't punish her for my mistakes." Her words came faster and faster, collapsing into one another, the way people talk when they've spent their whole lives apologizing for things that weren't their fault. Harrison didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked at her. The lines under her eyes, the way she stood between him and her daughter like a shield. She was shaking, not from defiance but from exhaustion. The kitchen light flickered once and steadied. Grace waited, clutching the edge of the counter as if bracing for a verdict. Lila's fingers found her mother's sleeve, holding tight. Harrison exhaled slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "Sit down, Mrs. Miller." She froze. "Sir." "Please," he said, nodding toward the chair beside her daughter. Sit. She hesitated, confused, but obeyed. He walked away from them, his robe brushing against the cold tile. For a moment, Grace thought he might be leaving, that he would call security or Mrs. Petrova. Instead, he stopped by the wall phone. She heard the faint click of the receiver being lifted, the soft static of a line connecting. "David," he said after a beat. His tone changed, calm and clipped, the voice of a man used to giving orders that were never questioned. "Yes, it's me. Sorry to wake you. I need something handled right now." He paused, eyes still fixed on the two figures at the table. "The hospital billing department," he said. "Grace Miller." "Yes. I want every outstanding balance paid, immediately. Transfer whatever it takes from my personal account. Then call Dr. Evans at the Blackwell Clinic and schedule a full evaluation. First appointment of the morning." Grace's hand went to her chest. "Sir, no," she whispered. "Please, don't." Harrison continued, unfazed. "I'll call him myself if you can't reach him. Just make sure it's done. And, David, add the Miller family to the Foundation's ongoing care list." He paused. "Yes. All of it. Thank you." He hung up the phone, the sound of the receiver settling into place louder than it should have been. Grace was on her feet before she realized it. "Mr. Blackwell, I can't, please, I can't accept that. It's too much." Her voice broke. "You don't have to, I already did," he said quietly. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's charity, sir. I don't take charity. I was raised to earn what I have." He turned back to face her. His eyes, usually distant, were sharp and alive. "Your uncle fought for this country," he said. "He jumped into fire so others could live. You ran into a burning building for a stranger's cat. That's not charity, Grace. That's justice catching up." She blinked, unable to speak. Her hand trembled over her heart. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Harrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to something softer than she'd ever heard from him. "Because for 10 years, I've lived in a house full of things I don't need, and not one of them made me feel anything. Tonight, your daughter reminded me what hunger looks like. Not just for food, but for hope." His words hung in the air, heavy and real. "And maybe I realized I've been starving too." Grace covered her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. Lila looked between them, unsure if she'd just done something wrong or something miraculous. Harrison looked at the little girl and gave the faintest smile. "She's braver than most adults I know," he said. "And she's got your heart." Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sir, thank you doesn't seem enough." "It isn't," he said, his tone kind. "But it's a start." He gestured toward the hall. "You'll both stay here tonight. No more buses, no more late shifts. You need rest." "But Mrs. Petrova works for me," he said. "And tonight, this house works differently." Grace's shoulders finally sagged. The fight drained out of her. "Thank you," she whispered again. Harrison nodded once, but his gaze drifted past them, to the dark window beyond the sink. His reflection looked back, an old man who'd spent years chasing order, wealth, control, and found none of it filled the silence. Now, in one sleepless night, a maid and her daughter had broken through that silence without even meaning to. He turned off the light above the counter, leaving only the glow from the hallway. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow will look different." As he walked out, Grace pulled Lila close, kissing the top of her head. Lila looked up at her mother. "Mama, are we in trouble?" Grace shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, baby," she whispered. "We're finally not." In the hallway, Harrison paused. The air felt lighter than it had in years. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he was certain it was worth waking up for. A month later, the house no longer sounded like an echo chamber. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, chasing the shadows that had lived there too long. The air smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread, not dust and silence. Someone had opened the curtains wide and filled the vases with flowers. Somewhere in the background, soft jazz drifted from the old record player that hadn't spun in years. Harrison Blackwell sat on the back terrace, a newspaper folded on his lap, unread. The morning light touched his hair, turning the silver to white. Beside him, a pot of coffee steamed. He wasn't thinking about markets or meetings. He was listening. From the garden below came laughter, bright, unrestrained, the kind that made walls seem unnecessary. Lila was running across the grass barefoot, her curls catching the sunlight. In her hand, she held the small bronze pin, polished until it gleamed. Every few steps she stopped to lift it toward the sky, letting it flash like a signal to someone above. "Look, Mr. Blackwell," she called, running up the stone path toward him. "It's all shiny again." She held it out proudly. Harrison smiled, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep, somewhere unused. "Your great-uncle would be proud," he said. Lila beamed. "Mama says I'm brave like him." "She's right," he said. "You both are." He looked past her, toward the open French doors where Grace stood, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She was dressed neatly, no longer in the uniform of a maid but in a soft gray blouse and skirt. Her face had color again. The constant cough was gone. When she saw Harrison looking, she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that needed no words. After Mrs. Petrova's departure, Harrison had insisted Grace take over the household. She had refused at first, saying she wasn't educated enough for such a role. He'd answered, "You already run this place better than anyone ever did. You just didn't have the title." Now she moved through the rooms with quiet authority, and the staff followed her lead. The house had rhythm again, human rhythm. Harrison turned back to Lila, who was watching him with the open curiosity only a child could have. "Do you still keep it with you?" he asked, nodding toward the pin. She nodded eagerly. "Every day. Mama says it's part of who we are." Harrison took the pin in his hand for a moment, feeling its weight, its history. The eagle's wings glinted in the sun. "You know," he said softly, "the night I found you in the kitchen, I thought I was saving you." Lila tilted her head. "Weren't you?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Maybe," he said, "but I think you were saving me too." The words seemed to settle in the air like dust in a sunbeam, glowing before fading away. Lila smiled, not fully understanding, but sensing the truth in it. She climbed onto the chair beside him, resting her small elbows on the table. For a while, they sat together in companionable silence, watching the garden. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of baked bread and blooming roses. From inside, Grace's voice floated through the open door. "Lunch in 10 minutes." "Yes, ma'am." Lila called back, grinning. Harrison chuckled quietly. "You've been promoted too, I see." "I'm her helper now," Lila said proudly. "She says I make the house happy." Harrison looked around at the sunlight, the music, the laughter. "You do," he said. The clock inside chimed 11, but no one rushed. Time, for once, felt like something gentle instead of something to measure. Lila leaned her head against his arm. "You think Mama's still scared sometimes?" she asked. "Everyone gets scared," he said. "Even me. Even you." He nodded. "But brave people do what's right anyway." She looked down at the pin in her palm, tracing the outline of the eagle. "Then I guess we're brave," she said. Harrison smiled again, eyes soft. "You didn't just need saving, Lila," he said quietly. "Maybe I did too." She looked up at him, puzzled but smiling, and in that moment the house seemed to exhale. The laughter in the garden carried through the open doors, filling the halls that had once known only silence. The mansion that had been a museum of memories was now a living place again, warmed by bread in the oven, footsteps on the floor, and the bright, unbroken sound of a little girl's joy. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.